What if public schools were required to display a religious text in every classroom? And what if one state could influence how medication is provided across the entire country? These aren't hypothetical questions. They are real legal battles happening right now in courts and government across the country. That's what we are breaking down today on Wahl on Law. Hello and welcome to the 15th episode of Wahl on Law. My name is Jonas Wahl, and I am a pre-law student at the University of Delaware. On this podcast, we cover what's happening across the country in law and policy and how it affects your daily life. Today, we do not have a guest joining us, but despite that, there's still a lot happening in the legal world over the past 2 weeks. Now, there has been a huge amount of news involving redistricting, which is already a topic we've covered several times on the podcast. Next week, we will actually have a special guest join us to discuss redistricting in much greater detail. So we'll save that conversation for then. Instead, today, we're going to focus on two major legal battles currently moving through the courts. First, we'll discuss a major ruling out of Texas involving the separation of church and state. Then, we'll break down a Supreme Court abortion case that could have implications far beyond abortion itself. So without further ado, let's get right into it. On April 21st, the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit ruled 9-7 that Texas can require public schools to display the Ten Commandments in every classroom. So first, what exactly is the Fifth Circuit? The Fifth Circuit is one of the most influential federal appeals courts in the country. Many of its rulings eventually end up before the Supreme Court. Now, this case involves a Texas law known as Senate Bill 10, which requires every public elementary and secondary school classroom in the state to display a poster of the Ten Commandments in a visible location. Supporters of the law argued that the Ten Commandments are historically important and have helped shape American legal traditions and moral values. But opponents argued something very different. The challengers claimed the law violates the First Amendment of the Constitution, specifically the Establishment Clause, which prevents the government from officially endorsing a religion. To make this more understandable, think about it this way. Imagine a public school classroom where students come from dozens of different religions: Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, and more. Opponents argue that when the government requires one religious text to be displayed in every classroom, it can make some students feel like the state is favoring one religion over another. But supporters respond by saying the law doesn't force students to practice Christianity or follow the Ten Commandments. Instead, they argue the displays are simply acknowledging historical traditions that have influenced the country's legal system. And that disagreement is exactly why this case is so controversial. The families challenging the law have already announced plans to appeal to the United States Supreme Court, and if the Supreme Court agrees to hear the case, it could become one of the biggest religious freedom cases in years, especially because the current court has generally taken a more religion-friendly approach than past courts. But why does this matter to you? Because this case is about a much larger question. How much religious expression can the government allow in public schools before it crosses the line into government endorsement of religion? And depending on how more courts answer that question, the impact could go far beyond Texas classrooms, and could impact how the next generation of children see religion. Finally, let's talk about a major Supreme Court abortion case that could have implications far beyond abortion itself. On May 11th, the United States Supreme Court temporarily extended a pause on a lower court ruling that would have restricted access to an abortion pill through telemedicine and the mail. So first, what exactly is this abortion pill? The abortion pill, known as mifepristone, is one of the two medications commonly used in medication abortions. Typically, a patient first takes this pill, followed by another drug called misoprostol. Together, these medications now account for roughly 2/3 of abortions in the United States. For years, patients had to receive this pill in person from a medical provider. But in 2023, the Food and Drug Administration, also known as the FDA, changed their rules and allowed medication to be prescribed through telemedicine and shipped through the mail. That's where the controversy began. Louisiana sued the FDA, arguing that the federal government illegally loosened access to the drug, especially because Louisiana has one of the strictest abortion bans in the country. The state argued that allowing abortion pills to be mailed into Louisiana undermines its own abortion laws. Now this case recently took a major turn. On May 1st, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals sided with Louisiana and reinstated an order rule requiring patients to obtain this abortion pill through an in-person visit with a clinician. But just days later, the Supreme Court temporarily blocked that decision while it decides what to do next. As of now, this abortion pill can still be prescribed remotely and mailed nationwide. Now, it's important to understand that this is not a final ruling. The Supreme Court has pressed pause while it considers the case further. But even though this is technically just a temporary ruling, the case itself is very significant. Because at its core, this case is not only about abortion, it's also about federal authority. The FDA exists to create nationwide rules for medications. Normally, when the FDA approves how a drug can be prescribed, those rules apply across the country, no matter your state. But Louisiana is now arguing that states should still be able to challenge those nationwide rules when they conflict with state laws. And that raises a much bigger question. If one state can successfully challenge how the FDA regulates abortion medication, could other states also challenge federal rules involving other medications as well? That's why pharmaceutical companies and legal experts are paying very close attention to this case. Right now, the Supreme Court is expected to decide very soon whether it will take up the case or allow the lower court ruling to move forward. And depending on what the court decides, this could become one of the most important abortion and federal power cases in years. Additionally, for women trying to access medication for an abortion, their access is getting more and more restricted, and soon they may have no other avenues left to legally get an abortion. So there we have it. Religion and abortion. Two incredibly divisive legal battles that could eventually end up reshaping how the Supreme Court approaches some of the biggest constitutional questions in the country. Before we close out, I want to say thank you for listening to the 15th episode of Wahl on Law. While this was a shorter episode, I hope you were still able to learn something valuable about the law. If you like this episode, make sure to follow or subscribe to Wahl on Law so you don't miss any future episodes. You can also sign up for our email list at wahlonlaw.com to get notified whenever a new episode drops. Thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next time on Wahl on Law.